James Jennings from Sourcr. Good morning. How are you?
Hey Pete, yeah, very good. Thanks for having me.
Mate, no, thank you. Thank you for being involved. Thank you for coming on to Recruitment Journeys, the podcast series. How's life in sunny Sydney this morning?
Mate, it's actually really good. It's been sunny today for the first time in about 2 weeks. It has literally tipped it down every day for almost 2 weeks. Crazy. So
Wow.
yeah, I've actually got for the first time in a long while a bit of a boat party tomorrow. So I'm hoping this weather's going to hold out, but we'll see.
A boat party.
Yeah,
Okay. So,
been a while.
yeah, these are the things that it's obviously, don't want to bang on about COVID too much, but we obviously almost famously came out of lockdown here in Melbourne, and we're allowed to now go out and do things, but we're all just a bit
Yeah,
freaked out by it. The first morning after first morning after lockdown was essentially stopped, I walked into my local cafe, and I walked in, and I suddenly felt very weird, almost
yeah,
anxious, and I couldn't work out what it was. And I realized it was because there was people sitting at tables eating and drinking. It was just such a bizarre thing to see.
yeah.
It's almost like it created this panic with him. It's like, what are you doing? You're going to get us all killed. But it
Yeah.
was,
I bet it's different, isn't it? I think, it takes so long to form a habit. I forget how long it is, but because you guys have been in lockdown for so long, it will seem strange for you being like that. I think in Sydney, because we've been fortunate that we haven't had the same kind of issues, like everyone's kind of getting pretty back to normal. And
yeah.
that may hit us in the back end at some point in the next few weeks if things kick up again. But yeah, I can imagine it's pretty tough for you guys.
But you know what? We know we got through it. My thoughts are now with the UK.
Yeah,
They're about, to think that they're about to go into what we've just come out of is and everybody keeps saying, yeah, but it's only 4 weeks. But that's what they told
well,
us. They told us it was
I,
only 6 weeks.
I just read that actually 2 minutes ago. Someone put a post up going, so they've extended the furlough scheme until the end of March, but lockdown's only till December. It's like, don't think so.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I think that, and without going on a tangent into some kind of political spectrum, that they're not quite locking down hard enough, and that they'll probably have to drag it out longer because it's certainly not the extent of the lockdown that you guys went through down there.
That's a fair point. I mean, if you're going to lock down.
Yeah.
That's the only way to do it, really.
I mean, it took you, what, 3-4 months to do it, even with probably the harshest lockdown there's been. So
Yeah.
that's my worry for the UK is that it's almost like a slow bleed, that they consistently try and drag it out, and then they have to go to quite a harsh lockdown in the end. But,
Yeah.
Hopefully it doesn't end up that way.
Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. All right. So, well, look, thank you again for being involved. This is Recruitment Journeys podcast. This is our second series. To quickly explain the concept of the podcast to anybody who may not have heard it, we speak to recruiters, and in your case, ex-recruiters from the Australian recruitment industry, and we talk about your journey, your recruitment journey, your career journey. We talk about how you got from A to Z and everything in between, in the hope to educate, resonate, inspire, motivate, whatever it might be. Yours is a very interesting story, James, and that's why we're talking to you today. We kind of categorize everybody. We put you in a box, if you like. We give you a title, and what we're calling you, with your kind permission, of course, is the recruiter who started a tech company which failed, so started again. Because you're going to be, thankfully, very honest about the fact that it wasn't all plain sailing from day one. What
No,
is?
absolutely not.
And you'd be kind enough to go into detail. It's interesting. Yours is the second conversation of this nature that we've had on here, because I spoke to Bernie Shima from Vincere, but you're a very different. You're in a very different stage of life to Bernie. Bernie had a very successful recruitment business, which he sold for millions and millions and millions of dollars, which he then used as his seed capital to start Vincere. I'm guessing your situation was slightly different.
Yeah, it was. I mean, Chris and I, when we started the business, I forget how old we were, probably 28, 29. So we were, two lads in our late 20s from the UK who had this, what we thought at the time was a fantastic idea on paper. And yeah, try and take that out to people and get money from them. It can be quite tough.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, we actually, our seed capital came from friends and family, which was an interesting experience in itself.
Which I love. I love that. I love stories like this. I love that, and that's what we'll get into.
Yes.
So look, I've already given you an introduction to the listeners and the viewers, James. But in your own words, who are you?
Yeah, cool. So, I'm James, one of the co-founders of Sourcr, originally from the UK. I was brought up in the Midlands, moved to Manchester in the UK. When I went to uni at 18, I stayed there till 25. Suddenly had enough of the grey and wet skies of the northwest of England, and decided it was time to move to Australia. I came out in 2012, did the whole backpacking thing, and like I think a lot of people that have been on these podcasts, I fell into recruitment. Applied to a recruitment agency for a job, and I was sucked in.
So okay, all right. So look, so that's kind of my opening question, and I'm almost thinking I need to take this question out because
everyone's the same.
I know the answer to every single. I think
Yeah.
I think I've done like 30 interviews, and maybe only 2 people have told me something different. So what happened? You went to Michael Page for a job, and they said.
So I decided I wanted to stay in Australia. So I used to be in retail in the UK. So I was a manager at Marks and Spencer, which is a bit like David Jones or Myer.
Mate, I don't think you need to explain what Marks and Spencer's is. We all know what
Marks on the channel, they may not know the glory of meal deals.
Best egg and bacon sandwiches in the world.
There you go. So yeah, I was a manager for M&S in the UK. I actually took career leave. So I told them I was coming back. I took 9 months, and I kept telling them I was coming back. I wasn't. I came out here and then applied for roles, and I was trying to get a role in retail. And then, my old boss at Michael Page called me up and said, look, do you want to come do recruitment? I was like, not really, but like, well, we'll give you a visa. I was like, yeah, awesome. So I completely fell into it. I didn't know really anything about recruitment before going into it. I had probably a naive view of some kind of HR role. I mean, I'd heard some of the stories about it. I was very naive going into it in terms of what recruitment was. So it was, I forget what the term is, but baptism by fire or whatever they call it.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So you joined Michael Page in Sydney. What was your
no, Melbourne, actually. I was down in Melbourne then.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
So I was in fact, I was in Sydney, and they called me and said, look, we've got a job for you, but it's in Melbourne. Will you move to Melbourne? And so I was like, well, yeah, sure. So I moved to Melbourne. I left my friends who I'd come out to Australia with in Sydney and moved to Melbourne.
Yeah, okay. That would explain why I because you were in my phone from when I headhunted you like many years ago. You couldn't remember. Obviously I could, James. I can remember everybody that I headhunted.
Yeah.
Okay, so you had obviously we're not gonna dissect your whole recruitment career here, but in fairness, it was only 3 years with Michael Page. Is that correct?
4, just coming up to 4, I think. Yeah.
4 years, but you did achieve kind of the level of manager.
Yeah.
So anybody who goes into their first recruitment role stays there for almost 4 years and becomes a leader in some way, shape, or capacity is doing well. That's a good first stint in recruitment. So on paper, even though you didn't know what you were letting yourself in for, it was obviously going well. Things were going well with your recruitment career. At what point in that kind of 4-year tenure did the kind of seed plant in your brain about this tech company? Well, how did that happen?
I think the seed planted almost instantly with going in there, but it probably took 2-3 years for me to really start to kind of seriously think about what needed to change. I think what was really striking to me in the space was that recruiters, and things have changed somewhat since then, but this was 2013. There was so much time spent on wasted business development. And what I mean by that is having whole offices pretty much cold call the online version of the Yellow Pages with very little thought process around who was being called. And recruiters hated it, clients hated it. On the flip side of that, I had friends who were in roles who needed to use recruiters, who couldn't find recruiters, didn't know who to use. And so there just seemed to be this huge disconnect in the market. And that's really where I think so where this all started actually, and I remember this part very specifically, is I'd just done a BD Thursday at Page. And look, I completely agree with BD days. They're important. I think they can be a little bit tedious sometimes where everyone knows a BD day is coming up. So it's like, right, you can't sit down till you've got your first meeting. So people like backlog the meetings, like ready to go. So straight away, someone's like, oh, I've just booked a meeting, sat down. It's like, yeah, I booked that meeting 3 days ago. Yeah. And there's just a bit of wastage in there with stuff like that. So I was a little bit deflated, and I was coming up to the kind of 3.5 year point. And I actually went to the Foresters, which is a pub in Surrey Hills in Sydney, and sat down with my co-founder, Chris. He'd been trying to find a recruiter. He was in finance, completely different space, not recruitment background at all. He was in the finance space and he'd been trying to find a good recruiter. He'd used one who'd let him down for one of his portfolio companies. And he said, who should I use? And I said, hey, like, honestly, I don't know. I don't know who, and if I don't know as a recruiter, how are other people meant to know which recruiters to use? And so that's really where the seed of all of this was born, was going, there's a disconnect between these two markets. We've got agencies that are spending far too much of their time cold calling businesses and not doing recruitment. And you've got businesses on the other side that are trying to find good recruiters, but don't really have a way to do that. And that's where it creates this quite toxic model where it's no win, no fee. We just give them a try and we kind of roll through them. So we thought that we could create a better version of this model by really connecting the two sides. So our initial kind of hypothesis to solve this was to create a marketplace. We would create employers on one side and recruiters on the other, and we'd match the employers to the recruiters. And by doing that, we hoped we could really increase the kind of service and conversion. So as you probably know, perm recruiters are known to fill about 35% of roles that they pick up, which seems just insanely low. So we thought we could potentially double that if we connected them to the right people. So we went down this model and we decided we were going to do it. We then went, right, we need to raise some money to build the tech to do it. We went to friends and family, which it was an interesting experience. So one of our friends has been very, very successful in the construction space and has cash. Another friend has got some from kind of various other means. It's a very interesting experience putting a business plan together and pitching the business for serious investment to two of your mates who you go out with and drink with all the time. So that was an interesting experience, but we actually managed to raise money from them.
And so tell me about that. What's that like? Do at the back of your mind, because when I started Mint Recruitment, right, I went to my dad and said, look, just give me some money just in case I've got it wrong. Yeah. And thankfully, I handed it all back to him quite quickly. Yours is a different proposition, because at the back of my mind, I never worried about damaging the relationship with my dad because he's my dad. It all goes tits up. But if you've got mates and you're asking for money, and it might not go right, did that prey on your mind?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we knew we were asking for money, and it was, it wasn't small amounts of money to them. And we really saw, and we truly believed in the vision and the value of the business at the time. Like, we believed it was going to become this, huge billion-dollar company, and we thought it was a huge opportunity. But it was always playing on our minds that, if this goes tits up, we've lost a lot of our friends and family's money. But I think at the same time, that kind of drives you to kind of not give up. I think there are, and I know it's something you're going to ask me later, but if you ever thought about throwing the towel in, there are definite times when you doubt seriously about what you're doing. But I think you almost, when you have investors, and particularly when it's your friends and family's money, but even our other investors who are involved now, you kind of have a responsibility to make this work. It's worked both ways.
So what did they get in return for their hard cash? And did they negotiate?
Do you know what? There are some of our friends, and Chris will agree with this, are probably some of the hardest negotiators we've ever had. It was and I think that's natural as well, because it was a bit of paper. Like, we didn't have a business then, so and we weren't exactly flush with investors that were all dying to dive into this business. We literally, two of us with a bit of paper, so. We didn't really have a lot of leverage on our side. So it was interesting and tough negotiations, but look, they've got and still do have equity in the business today.
Cool. Okay. All right. So you took that leap of faith, you pulled the money in, you risked all those friendships, and you launched, let's call it phase one of Sourcr, which is, I think I'm right in saying, which is the phase that didn't quite go according to plan. So can you tell us why? Can you tell us kind of in layman's terms, I think you've just touched on it, what the model was and why it didn't work?
Yeah, so the model was we, employers on one side, recruiters on the other, we would bring jobs through from employers, and we would use the information we had on recruiters to match those jobs to the best specialist recruiters in the market. The recruiters would fill those roles, and we would take a percentage of the fee upon successful placement for doing so. So that was the model. There were things that seemed just blatantly obvious in hindsight in terms of challenges. Look, some of the good stuff, it wasn't a complete failure. No, we had spec savers on board. we had own media, we had about 150 agencies on there. We did make money. It wasn't like we weren't making no money at all. We were generating revenue, but we suffered from a few challenges. So purely from a financial perspective, one of the big challenges were we were basically a perm recruitment business. And so our revenue was lumpy, and it consistently went like that, which is quite common in perm. That's not a good position to be in when you're taking 20% clips of a fee, or when you're trying to scale a technology business, because you need repeatable revenue. But more importantly, I think, was just fundamentally the model. I think what we learned from that period was, first problem was, once we connected the recruiter and the employer, we basically added zero value. We were of no value from that point whatsoever. We were just a hindrance. We were in the way. The recruiter just wants to speak to the client directly, and the client needs to speak to the recruiter directly so they can do their job. And we just sit in the middle. Now, the only way you can make that model sustainable is to continue to take 20% clips of all the fees that come through afterwards. And we just found that wasn't going to work. You know, we're in a big co-working space in Sydney. We had clients, so employer side clients in here, and we connect them to recruiters on the platform who'd fill the role. And then, you know, what's the next easiest thing for them to do? Does the client log back into Sourcr, post a job description out, and then push it out to a recruiter? Or do they just go, hey, Pete, I'm looking for another front-end developer? And the reality is, it's significantly easier to do that. And that was even people that were sat, you know, 2 meters away from us in the office. So we worked on a lot of ways to try and solve that. But the other fundamental challenge was, we never solved the conversion issue. So we thought we could move that, you know, 35% conversion up to more like kind of 70%. And we just couldn't. We were still around 35%. So we not really solved the problem. And I think a lot of that came down to the fact that we really didn't know which recruiters were truly specialists in what areas, because our method at that time was to ask them. And if you ask a lot of recruiters, they'll tell you they can fill a hell of a lot of roles. And we didn't really have the data on them to understand their true capability. And so, because we couldn't solve the conversion issue, because we couldn't solve this issue where it's actually just easier to build a direct relationship, a few other things, we just realized it was never going to scale in the way that we thought it would. And more importantly, it wasn't adding value to the market in the way that we thought it was going to do.
So when you, obviously you're coming to these realizations, were you just I am curious, you know, before we get to the point where you shift gears or you tweak things, is it just you and Chris working this out yourself? Have you got, because you know you're young entrepreneurs in a market in which you've never played, did you have mentors? Did you have people around you who are helping you, or was it you were literally just sticking it in the air and seeing what worked?
It was probably one of our failings in our earlier days, was not to bring enough mentors and advisors and kind of, you know, expert people around us. So it pretty much was me and Chris just kind of bouncing this back and forth with each other. And, you know, we've both got quite interesting dynamics. I'd have probably changed the model 25 times by the time that we'd done it and gone off in various different directions. Chris is very much focused on, he likes structure and process. He likes to make sure that things have been tested correctly, and that's actually really beneficial for me as well. And so we had this kind of push and pull where I kind of want to change things, he didn't. And I think we got to the point where we tested it in every way, which was the right thing to do. Whereas I'd have probably changed it on gut. Whereas because we went through Chris's route, we changed it based on data. And I remember I spent about a week pulling together this like 20-page report. Because, well, we've got to remember, we had investors at this point. We had external investors outside our friends and family who'd put money into a marketplace model. And we were thinking of changing the model. And so we had to basically go back to them and go, hey, I know you've just given us all this money, but actually it's not working, and we're going to completely change what we're going to do. And so I had to present back to them, you know, all the data and the reasons as to why it wasn't working. And so that's kind of the process we went through.
How does that work? I am curious, because this is, I'm just fascinated in the whole kind of startup kind of mentality and everything that happens in the background. So you've got this bunch of investors who are basically friends and family. What do? Do you just like meet them? I say, guys, can everybody go down the pub at 7 o'clock next Tuesday? We're just gonna have a chat, or is it a bit more professional, a bit more formal?
Yeah, look, it is a bit more. So at that time, we got investment from an external group of angel investors called Sydney Angels. So we have people on our board, and we have proper board meetings, like a real business, I guess. And we, so we met at a board meeting with our board director and board observer. And I think the good thing was that both of those people were, they both invested in startups quite a lot. And this is, it's not uncommon for startups to start as one model and completely change it. There's stacks of stories out there of huge businesses today that started as something completely different to what they are now. And so they were both really good about it. But yeah, there was definitely, there's one investor that I can think of in that group who was completely against it. Now, he wasn't on our board. We didn't have to deal with him directly, but he was not happy that we were changing the model at all. He was like, I've invested in this, I've put my money into this. And now I feel like very shortly afterwards, he's telling me it's not working. So, it's not always a simple conversation to have, but even though we were confident it's the right thing to do, and the investor and the board observer on our board, when we presented the data, they went, it's absolutely the right decision.
Was that daunting when you walked into that meeting, knowing what you had to tell them?
Yeah, we were very unsure about how that whole conversation was going to go, but they were both fantastic about it. And to be honest, I think one of them, it was actually them who kind of made the final call. It's like, guys, that's the way to go. Like that's what you should be doing. And we were like, right, okay, because we went through this phase where we kind of had the marketplace still running, and we had like a really basic version of what Sourcr is today still running. And we were trying to kind of run two businesses at the same time. And we're like, is there synergy between them? And they're like, guys, it's not working. Just shut that down and focus on what's going to add value to the market.
And how long into the life cycle of the business did this happen?
So we started officially in January 2017 is when me and Chris officially started in the business. We launched that product, I think, in August of 17. It took us way too long to launch a product because we wasted a hell of a lot of time building tech that we didn't need. And we then, I think, what year would it be? I think at the end of 2018 was when we started to have that realization that this is not. So it'd kind of been, maybe 12, 18 months of actually actively running that model that we realized it just wasn't working in the direction we wanted it to work in. Okay.
Cool. So you came to that realization 12 to 18 months in, which thankfully not doesn't sound like a huge amount of time. And you got the board and the investors on board to a degree. What did phase two look like?
Yeah. So at that time, and look, we were trying to solve some of the problems of the marketplace. So one of the big problems we had is we really lacked the data to understand recruiter capability. It's kind of the same problem that employers face or even candidates face. So we said, well, if we knew what placements recruiters were making outside of our platform, and if we knew what clients and candidates were saying about them, we get a really good picture of the actual capability of recruiters. And so we started to explore ways that we could, capture insights from their existing customer base. And that basically formed into the model today. So and in really short version, where Sourcr sits today, it really helps build recruiter and agency credibility by allowing good performing recruiters and agencies to showcase verified customer, so client and candidate reviews, and verified placements. And then to get those verified reviews and placements onto platforms that matter, like LinkedIn, like Google, like a website. And really in the day we're in today, your online brand and reputation is just absolutely critical. So that's really the route that we went down. So we were trying to solve some of those marketplace problems. We realized that actually what recruiters wanted was a way to stand out. And, I think many recruiters, will appreciate this, where particularly recruiters who've started their own business, where they look at, the typical multinationals that win all the contracts, and we go, we know that I can do a better job than all of those people. It's like, yeah, but you can't prove it. And so, people no longer trust salespeople, they trust data. And so what we've really done is allowed recruiters to back up their sales pitches with data. So it's no longer I've been in sales recruitment for the last 8 years. I've done X, Y, Z. It's like, here's all the data to back up everything that I'm saying. Here's all the placements I've made. Here's what all my clients and candidates have said. And that's just so powerful in this day and age.
Yeah. And it's, LinkedIn recommendations exist. I know you and I have had this conversation, right? LinkedIn recommendations exist, but they don't, they only prove so much. And as you say, they're right at the bottom of the LinkedIn page. Your data is a bit more quantifiable and a bit fresh and a bit more elevated and a bit more presentable and a bit more powerful, I guess.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's about having, data that's relevant to recruitment and really that sits around the type of questions we ask for the review, but also the placement data, and then being able to get that into places that matter. And that places online, be it through verified capability statements. We're starting to work with some clients and tenders now. So again, and while we were doing the old model, we talked to a lot of enterprise clients about how they ran their tender process. It's crazy. There's no data. It's like we get 5 agencies, we look through CCADs and we work out who we think specialist in what. We bring them in, get them to pitch, then we narrow it down to do a pitch again, and then we decide. It's like, do you look at any data? Like, do you look at what they get? And it doesn't exist. Yeah. And so there's a big gap in that space where it's really difficult for everybody to understand the capability of recruiters and agencies because the data is not there.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's fascinating. Okay, so you made this tweak. Well, not even a tweak. You just kind of just full overhaul, right?
Yeah.
And once you did that, did the penny just drop? Did it just go, right, this works, this is making sense? Or did you still have some kind of trepidation about whether this was the right path?
Yeah, we still had, challenges in well, our product is all credit to, to Chris runs a tech team as well. And Chris and Murillo, who's our lead developer, all credit to them and the rest of the guys. Like, our product's just evolved 30-fold in the last 12 months. But when we launched it, it was still fairly basic. And there was still a ton of challenges in terms of, getting recruiters to buy into it. And we still had this initial challenge around, it's all good collecting reviews and bringing them to Sourcr, but what value does that add to anyone when you're a small startup and nobody who at that time, who even knew Sourcr was? Like, nobody comes to our website. So we had this early days challenge where why would anyone want to collect Sourcr reviews? And so what we learned from people in other industries, particularly in real estate, but there's some really good examples in legal and other areas around how they built very kind of decentralized review platforms, which means that, our role is to help the automation and verification of that data. So we integrate the ATS, we collect the data automatically, verify it. But then it's about, well, how can we get that onto other platforms that actually matter? So LinkedIn is clearly the classic example where recruiters spend a lot of their time. How can we augment their LinkedIn profiles to help that data stand out on there? How can we get it onto their website? So as people visit their website, they're not just reading the same stuff that's on every recruitment agency website. We truly care about our clients and candidates. I can prove it now because I've got backed up data that's on there. But yeah, look, we hit loads of issues in the early days. I think it's really only in the last 6 months where we've gone, right, we know what we're doing now, and this is really starting to work.
Okay, so I keep coming back to the life of a tech startup entrepreneur, because I suppose you're on a journey of discovery. You're trying to find a product that works. You're trying to bring money through the door as well. You're trying to increase market share. You're trying to do all these things, and it's so many balls in the air, right? Instead of, if you just start a recruitment business, you kind of know what you're doing. You know what your market is. You know what the job is. You've got your network. You've just got to do a few deals, and then you're off. It's so much more complex and complicated. And I'm guessing, well, did you struggle in those first years financially? Were you going home and eating baked beans?
Yeah, I mean, so about you're right, and we literally said we have a really good board advisor called Sue House, and we were sat with the yesterday talking about our launch into the UK, and we're like, who can we talk to? And it's like, it's very different, because nobody's done what we're doing. There is no path that's set out, so you can't just lean on other people in the space. You have to kind of try and figure your way out through this maze. And I think that's why so many startups do kind of change and pivot. But yeah, you're right. Financially, Chris and I have taken massive hits financially to get the business to where it is today. And, we're still not earning, anywhere near the amount we would if we'd have stayed in our corporate roles. But we love what we're doing. Certainly for me, and I'm sure Chris would say the same, is we're learning every day. We basically spend every day doing things that we don't really know how to do, and we have to work stuff out. And that's what I love. Like, we're consistently learning, and I've learned so much about all aspects of business, of sales, of marketing, that just my eyes were just not even open to that.
Yeah. What's your personal motivation to do it? Where does the drive to do this come from?
Yeah, no, I think there's a few different areas. I think one is that my challenge that I had in recruitment was, and I think it would have changed if I'd have gone and started my own thing. So if I wouldn't have done this, I think I would have tried to start my own recruitment agency. I think it's that lack of learning that sometimes you can be in a role and you can be very, very good at it and you can make money, but you don't feel like you're being challenged and learning. And that was one thing I struggled with when I was in my previous role. I think look, and not gonna lie, everyone's got financial kind of reasons for doing these kind of things. Of course, we'd like a financial return at the end of it, but it is kind of bigger than that. It's also about, can I truly solve a kind of macro level problem? So I've identified a problem in an industry, and it's, can I and we and the people in the team between us, can we solve this real challenge of this disconnect between the two markets? And you know, I think when you're constantly having to work at that kind of is what gets you up in the morning.
Okay. What are you most proud of when you think about Sourcr and the journey that you've been on thus far?
Yeah, look, we kind of already touched on it, but I think, you know, I am definitely proud of the way that we were able to handle that pivot situation. There are a lot of people go two ways. They either change the business model 25 times, like I may have done if I hadn't have had a co-founder, or they go the opposite way, where it's not working, but they kind of have this reluctance or kind of sheer determination to keep going, even though it's blatantly not working. And I think, you know, having I don't know what the right word is, the balls or whatever you want to call it, to go, do you know what, we've tried this and we were wrong. Like, we were wrong about how we were approaching this, and we've got the data to back up why we were wrong. And being able to present that back and get the buy-in of the board, of the investors, of our friends, of our family, of everyone that was involved, and the employees, and getting everybody on board to go, actually, we know we've solved the vision and the dream of this for the last 18 months, but now actually this is the direction that we think is the right way to go. You know, that was a really tough period. And I think, but it was the right decision, and you know, we're a much better business for it.
Did you ever come close to thinking, or sitting down with Chris over a beer and saying, mate, you know what, this all feels a bit too hard. Let's go back to recruitment.
Yeah, it's without question. I think anyone who says they don't is lying. I think you absolutely have some very dark moments where you think, what am I doing with my life?
Yeah.
Like, life could be so much simpler if, you know, I had a normal job, I earned my money at the end of the month, I could go on all the social events with all my mates, you know, and life would be much simpler. But I don't think I've ever truly thought about jacking it in. And I think that really comes down to what I mentioned before, is when you've got investors, when you've got employees, when you've got other people, you have a responsibility that's almost greater than yourself. It's like, yeah, it might be, you know, maybe it would be better for me to go and get a nice normal job and do that, but I have other people to think about. And so I don't think I've ever truly thought about throwing the towel, but I've definitely had multiple times where I'm going, what are we doing? Like, this is just not working.
Oh mate, I think it's brilliant. I mean, I don't know you that well, James, but you know, if I was your parent, if my kids go and do something like this, I think they were crazy, but I'd be super proud of them for just having a crack, you know, because you could have taken a much easier route, but you haven't. And you know, the industry in the world needs people like you who are going to go there and break the mold. So mate, fair play. What advice, with taking all of that into consideration, what advice would you give, and not necessarily from the recruitment industry, but from any industry, you know, some young tech entrepreneurs who come up with an idea? And I think in this day and age, this is happening every single day.
Yeah.
Based on the experience that you've had and the mistakes that you've made, what advice would you give those people who are about to start out?
Yeah, I think, you know, there's probably a few things. One, and I say this to a lot of people who've joined our business, and I've no doubt we just hired another great guy as well. And I've no doubt a lot of the people that have joined will go on and start their own businesses. I think the biggest piece of advice is I'd go and join a startup and learn from the mistakes on someone else's money. Like, you know, Chris and I were both first-time founders. We'd both worked for corporates before. We'd never been in that environment where there's just no certainty, no process, no structure, and you have to create everything. And I think, you know, had we gone through that environment previously, we probably would have saved ourselves a lot of mistakes. I think you'll almost certainly, if you do decide to do it, you almost certainly won't need anywhere near as much capital and resources as you think you will. We were told this when we started. We were like, you really don't need to go out and build this tech. If you think about our original model, we could have got a spreadsheet, we could have got some clients, we could have got like a bit of a type form or something on the internet to post jobs to, and we could have got the candidates and sent them across going, can we actually prove that that works? But we went out and built this expensive bit of tech. Didn't really know what we were doing with that either. So, there's so many mistakes that have been made along the way. I think that ultimately, if you're going to do it, the realization that you have to have is that there's a lot of sacrifice that goes into it. And there's just no other way around it. It's a lot of hard work. You miss out on social occasions. You miss out on other things in life. And if you still really want to do it, knowing all that, then you should absolutely go and do it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, mate, I'm sure that that there's going to be more challenging days in the future, but where is the business right now? In fact, before you answer that question, I'll let the kind of listeners and viewers into a little secret. I asked you earlier how things are going. You said, "Oh, mate, things are going great," but I don't want to be insensitive because I know there's a lot of businesses out there doing it tough. And whilst I've been chatting, I've been thinking about that. We need good news stories in our industry right now. We need to hear that people and businesses in the recruitment industry are doing well. So with that in mind, would you tell us how are things going at Sourcr at the moment?
Yeah, look, it is. I think the last 6 months, has fundamentally changed our business for the better. And look, so I'll probably start this by saying we had a hell of a lot of challenges. So when COVID hit in mid-March, we were going into April and we were expecting our first profitable month. We had a huge pipeline of deals. We had some really big clients that were due to come on board. And mid-March, everything ground to a halt. And we were like, shit, this is really going to be bad. And we panicked a bit like everybody else did. And we started trying to talk to all the agencies that we could. And half of them were panicking. And we would kind of do a wrap up at the end of every day and go, like, what have you heard? I'm like, man, I honestly can't even speak to some of these agencies. Like I am the last person they want to hear from.
Yeah.
So we got together as a business and said, well, what's the best way that we approach this? We said, we're banging our heads against a brick wall, trying to sell a paid marketing solution to recruitment agencies right now. But that's not what the market needs. And it's not going to do us any good. And so we got together as a board again, and we made the decision to just give away the product completely free. And so we gave away our top paid version completely free. We said, look, let's just give it away for 3 months for free. Let's just try and help agencies build their brand in what is, a more online world than it's ever been. And just accept that we're not going to get any revenue for 3 months. And so that was a tough decision as well. Chris and I had to make some personal financial decisions around that, which were very tough to do. But we said, look, it's the right thing for the business. It's the right thing for our client base. And that caused us to rethink everything. And we rethought the way that we acquired customers. We rethought all of our processes. We used to be, so this is something the other day, it's ironic because of the type of business we are. We used to be a pretty much completely outbound business. We used to be doing the same things recruiters did. And we focused so much more heavily over the last 6 months on content, on marketing, on webinars, and ebooks. And, we can bring 200 to 300 leads in a month now from all of the ebooks and webinars and things that we do. And that was something that wasn't in our wildest dreams 6 months ago. And so it's fundamentally changed the way that we operate. So to back to your original question of where we are right now, yeah, things are going amazingly well. Every month we are setting new records in terms of new recruiters on board, new agencies on board. We hit 1,000th recruiter last week. We've launched it to the UK and New Zealand, which we never would have done had COVID hit. We had completely different plans. So, and we've just hired someone who, he has resigned now, so probably can say it, 4 years at Indeed selling to recruitment agencies. We're hiring really high caliber people now as well. Julian, who came on board earlier this year, another person, really strong background at Hayes, strong background in recruitment tech startups. So things are in a really, really good place at the moment. And I think what this period has done from an agency perspective is, if you think about the last 3 years, recruitment's been booming. Like, we've had the best market that there's been for a long time. And so recruiters haven't had to do anything differently. Like, why would you? You keep doing what you're doing. And this period has caused all of those things that have been in discussion for the last 5 years, like marketing, like online brand, like personal brand, all of those things are now coming to the fore. And agencies are starting to take marketing and branding a lot more seriously. And I think this period's also given agencies some, I don't know, the downtime's the right word, but a period where they're not flush with jobs and they're thinking about, okay, well, what do I want my agency to look like as we come out the other side of this? And they're starting to put new systems in place. They're trying to do more with less recruiters as well. And all of those things have kind of fed into the messages and narrative that we've been saying for the last 12, 18 months. And it's worked really well.
Yeah, look, I don't think there's anything wrong in using this time, this unique period in history to our advantage to improve how we do things, and I think we as an industry are doing it. You know, you guys Sourcr have obviously done it, and it sounds like, you know, by doing the right thing when you gave away the product for a few months, you know, it's karma. You know,
Yeah,
the universe rewards you. It's as simple as that.
it 100% did. And, you know, we've got a great partnership with the RCSA as well. And I think just through that period, we got so much, like you say, kind of karma back from the market, who were really appreciative of what we do. And the agencies were all really appreciative. Not all of them have gone on to be paying customers. Some of them have, but that's great as well. Like, we've been able to add value and learn from them at the same time. It's been like the last 6 months has been really positive.
Oh, mate, you deserve it. Well done. So I suppose that kind of leads us on to our closing question, which is, you know, let's fast forward 6 months. You know, we're into a new year. Vaccine has been discovered. Donald Trump is a distant memory. Sorry, getting political. What does 2021 and 2022 look like for you and for Sourcr?
Yeah, so we kind of soft launched into the UK this year. Next year is really about growing that market. We're in the final stages of finalising who's going to go over there and launch that for us. So we'll have someone on the ground in the UK. The agencies we've worked with so far, we've had a really positive response from, and we see that as a massive opportunity. But we've also still got a big job to do here in Australia and New Zealand. So it's to continue to grow the Australian New Zealand market, really start to expand in the UK. But along with all of that, it's continuing to evolve the product. And I think that's, you know, if you speak to any of the recruiters who've used our platform, we're constantly pushing out new products, new features, new ways to try and help really good recruiters and agencies stand out and differentiate and get their positive stories in front of their prospects. And that's really what we're focused on. So there'll be a lot of product evolution as well.
Brilliant. Well, mate, thank you. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for getting up here and being honest about the fact that it's there's possibly been more hurdles than plain sailing. I think that's what anybody who's thinking about getting involved in a startup needs to hear. So thank you for your candor.
Yeah,
and I'm delighted things are going well now. It sounds like I say, bit of karma, but it sounds like you deserve it. So fair play.
Yeah, thank you. No, thanks for having me on and allowing to share it.
Mate, take care and best of luck getting through the rest of the year.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Pete.
Bye-bye.